Hey y'all, Wagwan, it's me, V. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Ashes to Ashe, where I discuss decolonization, challenging the status quo, radical spirituality, and other ideas, tools, and knowledge that Black folk can use for our collective liberation. First things first, I want to say thank you so much to all the new subscribers, for 100 subscribers, and for the comments, the engagement, the insight in the comments. I really, really love going back and not going back and forth, engaging with y'all, and the insight, and this y'all. I'm having fun. And I really, really am grateful. So I want to say thank you. Okay, today I want to discuss anti-Blackness as a spiritual balm for non-Black folks. Dissect what that means, what that looks like, provide some examples, an example of an historical example and a contemporary example in our modern day culture. So yeah. So first things first, when I say anti-Blackness as a spiritual balm, what does that mean and what does that look like? Okay, so first, anti-Blackness, when I talk about anti-Blackness, I am used to talking about it in the lens of Afro-pessimism, which is the idea, according to Frank Wilderson, and he's right, and according to me, that Black folks are occupy a non-human, sentient being. Okay, so first, I want to define anti-Blackness. For me, I'm always going by the Afro-pessimist definition. And according to Frank Wilderson, in that definition, he states that Black folks occupy and are non-human sentient beings within the global cultural context. And in this, all other races derive their humanity from our dehumanization. AKA, Black folks occupy a role where we are perpetually dehumanized, scapegoated, and stereotyped. And the example that he uses is that you wouldn't ask your hammer how it feels about hammering a nail into the wall because it's your hammer. That is what it's supposed to do, i.e., we are not supposed to occupy or be human. And in our dehumanization, that is the role that we're supposed to play. And essentially, through our dehumanization, other races arrive at their humanity through us. Yeah. Secondly, spiritual balm. Spiritual balm is a reference to the energetic and the spiritual soothing, validation, and comfort that non-Black folks get out of our dehumanization. Like I mentioned, receiving their humanity from our dehumanization, and that in a spiritual context, this exists more than a political or social or cultural phenomenon, but is energetically and spiritually something that they invest in and care about and need for their own, for their spiritual sense of well-being. All of life is truly energetic and a spiritual experience beyond, right, this physical plane. Anti-Blackness, as it exists beyond the social, cultural, and political power that it provides non-Black folks when they buy into it as an idea, as an ideology, when they engage in it, whether that's systemically, or interpersonally. There is a spiritual soothing and an energetic power that non-Black folks receive from anti-Blackness and their position on the racial hierarchy. This is where my theory of Black folks as the scapegoat and America or white supremacy as a narcissist come to play, right? So narcissism, if you ask me, is essentially grandiose energy vampirism. Narcissists need to seek external validation, energy, and attention from others. They need to demean, degrade, hurt, and attempt to disempower others through various means, whether you're malignant or vulnerable, it doesn't matter. Essentially because they cannot, within and from themselves, generate these feelings of power, of self-worth, and they are bolstered socially, yes, in their circles, but energetically and spiritually and egotistically by these false and convoluted power plays. It makes them feel good about themselves to make others feel less than. This is essentially, in a nutshell, the idea of someone who can only be tall while they're standing on somebody else's back, which I think is a perfect example of what anti-Blackness looks like, not only in the global context systematically, but also interpersonally. So when we're talking about a spiritual balm, beyond the political, societal, and cultural uses of anti-Blackness. Spiritually, anti-Blackness for non-Black folks does something beneficial for them, right? Having a superior social status, right? Feeling better than us makes them feeling better about themselves, and that those feelings of being powerful, of being worthy, of being beautiful, of being smart, of being civilized are only brought to fruition in relation to robbing Black folks of that, of dehumanizing us, and denying those things of us. Spiritually, it's a distortion of envy on a scale that is getting out of hand, if you ask me. So a specific historical example of this that I love, and one of the main reasons why I specify the words anti-Blackness versus racism, and why I specify non-Black folks instead of, let's just say, white folks, which what people expect, because this is a global system, and the racial hierarchy is Black folks at the bottom, and whatever order you in at the top, it don't really matter to me, because baby, I'm Black. So World War II. So after the attack on Pearl Harbor during World War II, Japanese Americans were forced into internment camps by the American government. This was a result of, just hostility, anti-Asian racism, anti-Asian sentiment, generalization, cruelty, etc. And in the midst of this human rights violation of literally being behind bars, these Japanese prisoners somehow found the time, the energy, and the resources to don and perform blackface minstrelly for their entertainment. Yes. It's not funny. Why would folks who are literally behind bars being subject to human rights abuses by the government go out of their way above and beyond to, again, find the resources, the time, the energy, but also engage in these blackface minstrel shows? Simple. It's because it made them feel better about themselves. It made them feel better about where they were, their literal internment. It made them feel better about the reality of what their government was relaying to them, despite the fact that they were not, in fact, the people who committed, the attack on Pearl Harbor. It soothed spiritually not only the reality of their abuse, but their position in the racial hierarchy. That's why. And this is a fantastic example of what enabling looks like in this narcissistic family system, if you will. You have the narcissist, you have an enabler, you have a scapegoat, golden child, lost child. And in this, it was an enabling, because instead of deciding, damn, maybe we should form a political organization or something. Maybe they did. I don't know. It was, let us not only engage in, but perpetuate anti-Blackness while we're suffering. And temporarily, this phenomenon of using anti-Blackness as a spiritual balm, as energetic power, looks like the Sydney Sweeney American Eagle campaign bullshit debacle, right? Is it rage bait? Yes. Is it eugenics? Yes. Is it white supremacy? Yes. Is it a dog whistle? Absolutely. But more than that, energetically and spiritually, it's a desperate cry for attention from white supremacists, from eugenicists, to Black folks, and essentially a demonstration of that distortion of envy, like I talked about. Instead of confronting the deep shame, the deep insecurity, the deep fear, right, of shifting political power, political awareness, class consciousness, instead of acknowledging and confronting these insecurities, these feelings of unworthiness, instead of holding themselves accountable, instead of growing, instead of changing, they're projecting all of these fears, insecurities, and other hoopla onto Black folks by claiming that they have better genes, and broadcasting it to the world. And this spiritual balm exists to cover up that wound of, as a classic narcissist, of deep shame, of deep envy, of a lack of identity. Because once you realize that America specifically, has no identity without Black folks. You start to look at our positioning at the bottom of the racial hierarchy as a scapegoat in not only American but global, culture very, very differently. And something else that I really wanted to offer, I am rereading, because I never finished it, Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin, the icon James Baldwin. And in it, interestingly enough, he touches on the ideas of Afro-pessimism, but also specifically in the passages that I'm going to share and read, the relationship of Black America to America, not only as a whole, but also this inability and unwillingness and fear to confront the truth of their relation to Black folks, and thus themselves. So yeah. So this is on pages 42, 43, and 44. Native son does not convey the altogether savage paradox of the American Negro situation. He's talking about Native Son by Richard Wright, of which the social reality, which we prefer with such hopeful superficiality to study, is, but as it were, the shadow. It is not simply the relationship of oppressed to oppressor, of master to slave, nor is it motivated merely by hatred. It is also, literally and morally, a blood relation, perhaps the most profound reality of the American experience, and we cannot begin to unlock it until we accept how very much of it contains of the force and anguish and terror of love. Negroes are Americans, and their destiny is the country's destiny. They have no other experience besides their experience on this continent, and it is an experience which cannot be rejected, which yet remains to be embraced. If, as I believe, no American Negro exists who does not have his private Bigger Thomas living in his skull, then what most significantly fails to be illuminated here is the paradoxical adjustment which is perpetually made, the Negro being compelled to accept the fact that this dark and dangerous and unloved stranger is part of himself forever. For context, as someone who didn't read the book but is reading this book, or who didn't read Native Son but is reading Notes of a Native Son, Bigger Thomas essentially, I believe, murders a white person in this narrative, and James Baldwin is examining basically how this story and this character and analysis exists in the broader context of American culture, specifically our America's relation to Black folks. Present Bigger as a warning is simply to reinforce the American guilt and fear concerning him. It is most forcefully to limit him to that previously mentioned social arena in which he has no human validity, Afro-pessimism. It is simply to condemn him to death. It's interesting because Frank B. Wilderson in Afro-pessimism says that Black folks globally suffer a social death through their dehumanization. For he has always been a warning. He represents the evil, the sin, and the suffering which we are compelled to reject. It is useless to say to the courtroom in which this heathen sits on trial that he is their responsibility, their creation, that his crimes are theirs, and that they ought, therefore, to allow him to live, to make articulate to himself behind the walls of prison the meaning of his existence. The meaning of his existence has already been most adequately expressed, nor does anyone wish, particularly not in the name of democracy, to think of it any more. As for the possibility, moreover, the courtroom, judge, jury, witnesses, and spectators recognize immediately that Bigger is their creation, and they recognize this not only with hatred and fear and guilt and the resulting fury of self-righteousness, but also with that morbid fullness of pride mixed with horror with which one regards the extent and power of one's wickedness. Yeah. Last quote. To tell his story is to begin to liberate us from his image, and it is, for the first time, to clothe this phantom with flesh and blood, to deepen by our understanding of him and his relationship to us, our understanding of ourselves and of all men. James Baldwin, the legendary, the genius, the prophet. Highly recommend this book. And yeah, specifically that last, his prose is crazy. Delicious, delicious sentence. Where is it? To tell his story is to liberate us, to clothe this phantom with flesh and blood, and to deepen our understanding of him and his relationship to us and our understanding of ourselves and all men. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see y'all soon. Be well. Peace.